The rain has been falling for hours. It is 4:30 in the afternoon on a Monday in late November, and the light is already gone from the Surrey hills. The trees along the bridleway are bare. The path is dark. The air temperature is dropping toward freezing. A black cab pulls up at the edge of the road near the Hand in Hand pub at Box Hill. The rear door opens. A 16-year-old girl steps out into the rain. She is alone. She does not hurry toward shelter. She does not walk away. She simply stands there, completely motionless, as the cab pulls back onto the road. The driver checks his rearview mirror. She is still standing there, still not moving. The rain is coming down, and she is standing in it, and then the road curves, and she is gone. That is the last confirmed moment anyone can place Ruth Wilson on this earth. It is November 27th, 1995. She is 16 years old. She has been planning this day in some form for weeks, and whatever she intended to happen next, whether she meant to die, to disappear, or to meet someone on that hill, no one has ever been able to say with certainty. Ruth Wilson has never been found. This is the story of a girl who walked into the Surrey hills on a November afternoon and was never seen again. A case that Surrey police have never closed, never solved, and never fully explained. A disappearance that has haunted the people who knew Ruth, the journalist who couldn't let the story go, and the retired detective who spent years trying to make sense of what happened on that hill. If you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell. Cases like this one deserve to be remembered. Let's get into it. To understand what happened to Ruth Wilson, you have to understand who Ruth Wilson was, and that turns out to be more complicated than anyone around her suspected. She was born on January 31st, 1979, in Surrey, England. By the time she was a teenager, she was living with her father, Ian Wilson, and her stepmother, Karen, in a 17th-century cottage on Wanham Lane in the village of Betchworth, a small, quiet civil parish in the Mole Valley, about 3 miles east of Dorking. From the outside, the picture was exactly what it looked like: a picturesque Surrey village, a father who was a parish councillor and a former head of science, a church-going family. Ruth herself sang in the choir at St. Michael's Church, played the organ, rang the bells, and was studying for her A-levels in the 6th form at the Ashcombe School in Dorking. Her friends describe her in ways that are affectionate and honest in equal measure. Studious, well-mannered, traditional, unconventional in how she dressed. Not, as one friend put it directly, one of the cool girls. Her interests were reading, music, cycling. She and a friend once spent an entire day on a bike ride through the Surrey countryside. She was, by most accounts, deeply intelligent, and in the way that deeply intelligent teenagers sometimes are, she was quietly struggling with things that no one around her fully understood. One of the people who understood her best was Roxy Birch, a school friend who would later speak publicly about Ruth and take part in a police reconstruction of her disappearance. Another was Catherine Mayer, who described a friendship built on shared difficulty. Both girls were going through hard times. They gravitated toward each other. Catherine recalls Ruth as someone who had so much going on inside her head that she was desperate to find out who she was. What neither of them knew, what almost no one around Ruth knew, was the thing that had broken her open in the weeks before she vanished. Ruth Wilson's biological mother was a woman named Nesta Wilson, born Nesta Landegg on May 1st, 1948. Nesta died on December 10th, 1982, when Ruth was 3 years old and her sister Jenny was an infant. For more than a decade, Ruth was told that her mother had died in an accident, that she had fallen down a flight of stairs and broken her neck. That was the story Ian Wilson and Karen Wilson maintained. It was not the truth. The truth was on a death certificate. In October 1995, approximately 6 weeks before her disappearance, Ruth traveled to a public records office in London. She obtained her mother's death certificate. The official cause of death documented on that certificate was suicide by hanging, registered at Red Hill General Hospital. Nesta Wilson had not fallen. She had taken her own life. And for 12 years, Ruth's family had not told her. Friends who spoke to Ruth in the weeks that followed describe her as deeply troubled, angry, and destabilized. She had built her understanding of her own history on a story that was not true, and now that foundation was gone. In the language of psychology, what Ruth experienced was not just grief, it was betrayal trauma. The discovery compounded everything. The loss of a mother she had never properly known. The realization that the adults closest to her had maintained a deliberate deception, and the particular horror of learning that the woman whose absence had shaped her entire childhood had died by suicide. She was 16 years old. She was carrying this alone. Her friend, Catherine Mayer, later said that Ruth had asked her a question in the period before her disappearance. If things worked out for Catherine in Sheffield, where she was moving, could Ruth come and join her? Catherine was trying to get herself sorted. She didn't have room to help Ruth at the same time. And then Catherine left for Sheffield, and Ruth's parents called to tell her that Ruth had gone missing. By then, Ruth had already spent her last normal weekend on Earth. On the Saturday before she vanished, she took Will Kennedy, her ex-boyfriend, with whom she had remained close, and a friend named Neil Phillipson out for a meal. She insisted on paying. She told them it would be something to remember her by. On Sunday, she attended handbell practice at St. Michael's Church as usual. She spent Sunday evening at Will Kennedy's home. On Monday morning, she did not take the school bus with her sister Jenny. She did not accept a lift from Will Kennedy when he came to offer one. She said she would catch up later. She never did. Monday, November 27, 1995. This is what is known. Ruth's parents, Ian and Karen Wilson, left the family home early that morning for their respective teaching jobs. Ian Wilson's last words to his daughter, as he pushed past her in the house that morning, were, "Out of my way, I'm in a hurry." Neither of them knew those would be the last words he would say to her. At approximately 11:30 in the morning, Ruth ordered a taxi from Betchworth and traveled into Dorking Town Centre. At around noon, she walked into Thistle's Florists at 257 Dorking High Street. She ordered an expensive bouquet of flowers addressed to her stepmother, Karen Wilson. She left strict, explicit instructions. The flowers were not to be delivered until Wednesday, November 29th. 2 full days after she would be gone. There was no card. There was no note. The forensic significance of this act cannot be overstated. Ruth Wilson was not acting on impulse. She knew with certainty that she would not be in that house on Wednesday. Whatever she had decided, whatever was going to happen on Box Hill, she had decided it before she walked into that florist's shop. After leaving Thistle's, she spent several hours in the Dorking Library, alone. What she did there, what she read, what she was thinking, those hours are unaccounted for. At approximately 4 in the afternoon, she hired a black cab from Dorking railway station. The taxi carried her out of Dorking, through the Surrey Hills, to a bridleway a short distance from the Hand in Hand pub, now renamed the Box Tree, on Box Hill. She arrived at approximately 4:30 in the afternoon. November light in Surrey is gone by this hour. The temperature was near freezing. It had been raining heavily. Ruth got out of the cab. She did not walk away. She did not move toward shelter. She stood by the side of the road, motionless, as the driver pulled away. He checked his rearview mirror before the road curved. She was still standing there. That is where the confirmed record ends. Surrey police launched a search operation that same night. Approximately 1,000 acres of parkland around Box Hill were covered. Dog units, helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras, specialist search and rescue teams working through the dense underbrush and around Betchworth Quarry. No heat signature was detected. No body was found. No physical trace of Ruth Wilson was located. She was 16 years old. She had no passport. Her bank card had not been activated, and it has never been used. She had no driver's license. She left no note that has ever been officially disclosed. She has never been formally declared dead. Ruth Wilson has never been found. The disappearance of Ruth Wilson was investigated by Surrey police from the night of November 27, 1995. From the beginning, the case presented a specific and frustrating problem. There was no body, no crime scene, no witness beyond the taxi driver, and no evidence that a crime had taken place at all. Surrey police classified the matter as a missing person inquiry, a classification that has never changed. In the immediate aftermath, multiple appeals were made for Ruth to come home. The family's position, maintained publicly for years, was that Ruth was out there somewhere, that she had chosen to leave and might still choose to return. Appeals were issued. Coverage ran in local and regional press. And then, slowly, the case receded. It might have stayed receded. In December 2002, journalist Martin Bright published a piece in The Observer titled "The Vanishing." It was part of a broader article about missing people, but the Ruth Wilson case lodged in him in a way he couldn't shake. Something about the circumstances, the age, the location, the absence of any clear explanation felt wrong to him. He couldn't let it go. But without cooperation from the family or the police, he couldn't take it further either. And so it remained one of those cases that niggles away at you, as he later put it, without resolution. The case came back to life not because of a confession or new evidence or a body. It came back because of a retired police officer who moved to Dorking and started reading local newspaper archives. Liam McCauley spent 30 years in the Metropolitan Police, significant portions of that career in counter-terrorism. He retired around 2009 and relocated to the Dorking area. At some point after his arrival, he encountered the story of Ruth Wilson. And unlike most people who read it, he couldn't accept the explanation that a 16-year-old girl from a Surrey village had simply walked off a hill and vanished. He began investigating privately. He submitted a Freedom of Information request to Surrey Police, asking to review the file and statements. It was denied. Surrey Police cited the ongoing nature of the case. McCauley wrote to the Wilson family. He received no response. He kept going anyway. For years, McCauley worked the case in isolation, going over what he knew, identifying what he didn't, picking at the edges of a story that felt incomplete to him. He was certain a third party was involved. He was certain something had happened on that hill that the official record didn't account for. He couldn't prove it. He couldn't get access to anything that might help him prove it. He later admitted that there were nights he couldn't sleep over it. Before we get to the breakthrough, if you've been following this case with us, now is the time to subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that button, we'll be right back. Eventually, McCauley contacted Martin Bright, the journalist who had written about Ruth in 2002 and never fully moved on from her. The two men began collaborating, and the result, after years of independent work by McCauley and renewed investigation by Bright, was the 2018 documentary Vanished, the Surrey Schoolgirl. In the course of making that documentary, Bright and McCauley did something Surrey police couldn't or wouldn't do. They found Ruth's friends. Roxy Birch had already gone public, appearing on the BBC program Missing Live in 2009 or 2010 to make an appeal. But her testimony to the documentary team went further. She confirmed that Ruth had no passport and didn't know how to drive. She pointed out, plainly and practically, that a 16-year-old girl without documents, without a license, and without an activated bank card simply cannot vanish for decades without leaving any record. She noted that Ruth's friends had never stopped watching for some signal, any signal, that she was alive. Catherine Mayer had never spoken publicly before. She came forward to Martin Bright and told him things the official record did not contain. She described Ruth's state of mind in the weeks before the disappearance. She described the friendship they had formed over shared difficulty. She described Ruth asking to come to Sheffield. She described how she heard about the disappearance. Her parents called her when she was already in Sheffield and told her that Ruth had gone missing. And she told Bright about October 1995, about Ruth going to London, about the death certificate, about Nesta Wilson. This is the moment the entire case turns on. Stay with us. The discovery that Ruth Wilson had found her mother's death certificate, that she had learned, 6 weeks before her disappearance, that Nesta Wilson died by suicide by hanging, not from a fall, changed the documentary team's understanding of everything. It explained the psychological state her friends had been describing. It explained the anger, the desperation, the question about Sheffield. It reframed the flowers, the meal, the paid dinner, the refusal to take the school bus. When the documentary team brought this finding to the surface, the Wilson family issued a formal statement. Ian Wilson confirmed that the family had known Ruth had discovered the circumstances of her biological mother's death, but stated that she had chosen not to discuss it with any family member. The family expressed that they were hurt by characterizations of Ruth's childhood as built on secrecy. Surrey police, when approached by the documentary team, declined to share information about their investigation. They expressed concern that the documentary might be critical of the original investigative approach. They eventually confirmed that a formal review of the case had been conducted, led by Chief Superintendent John Savell. and that ongoing case management was being handled by Detective Chief Inspector Alex Geldart. The review outlined 5 possible explanations for Ruth's disappearance: accident, abduction, suicide, murder, or a decision to start a new life elsewhere. No line of inquiry has been elevated above the others. No new evidence has emerged. There is no named suspect in the disappearance of Ruth Wilson. Surrey police have never publicly identified a person of interest. The family liaison officer assigned to the case, former Detective Mark Williams Thomas, stated publicly that the investigation found no evidence of abduction by a stranger. No individual has ever been charged. No individual has ever been formally described by law enforcement as a subject of investigation. Liam McCauley, in his years of independent investigation, maintained a theory that a third party met Ruth at Box Hill and that something happened at that meeting, that her behavior exiting the taxi, standing motionless in the rain without moving toward shelter or a destination, was consistent with waiting for a vehicle, that someone she knew was coming to collect her. McCauley believed someone from the local community bore responsibility. He was unable to substantiate that theory with any evidence that has entered the public record. Will Kennedy, Ruth's ex-boyfriend, was close to her in the days before she vanished. He was the last person outside her immediate family to see her under ordinary circumstances on Sunday evening, the night before she disappeared. He told the documentary team that he had a suspicion there was someone else involved in her disappearance, though he did not name anyone. He described feeling numb about it. He said his emotional connection to the event had, in some way, closed off. The only other named individual in the broader geographic context of this case is Brian Lunn Field, a man convicted on November 15, 2001 at the Old Bailey for the 1968 abduction, sexual assault, and murder of 14-year-old Roy Tuttle near Mickleham, Surrey. A case solved 33 years later through DNA recovered following a drunk driving arrest. Field's case is relevant only as precedent, as evidence that cold cases in this precise geography can eventually be solved. Forensic behavioral analysis renders him an implausible suspect for Ruth Wilson's disappearance. His documented victimology is exclusively adolescent males, and the circumstances of Ruth's disappearance differ fundamentally from his established pattern of opportunistic roadside abduction. What the verified record leaves is this: Ruth Wilson was a deeply distressed 16-year-old girl who planned her disappearance in some form, traveled alone to an isolated bridleway on a cold and rainy November evening, and was never seen again. Whether she went to that hill to die, to meet someone, or with some other intention she had not shared with anyone, the record does not say. That question remains open. There has been no trial in the disappearance of Ruth Wilson. No charges have ever been filed. No arrest has ever been made. No inquest has been held. Under the Presumption of Death Act 2013, Ruth Wilson has not been formally declared legally dead. Surrey police continue to classify the case as an active missing person inquiry. This section of the script, where a trial would normally be documented, is instead a record of absence. The absence of a body, the absence of a crime scene, the absence of a named suspect, the absence of charges, the absence of a verdict, the absence of any legal proceeding that might have forced the facts of this case into a public record. Ruth Wilson was 16 years old in 1995. She would be 46 years old today. 30 years have passed. Surrey police state that they continue to keep an open mind about what is behind her disappearance. They confirm there is no new evidence to elevate one line of inquiry above the others. The taxi driver who dropped her at Box Hill spoke to police. The specific details he provided, the time, her attire, her stillness in the rain, form the bedrock of everything investigators know about her final confirmed moments. Whether his account was ever codified into a formal signed statement is not confirmed in any publicly available record. The Freedom of Information request submitted by Liam McCauley to access the file and interview transcripts was denied. The grounds for denial: the case is still ongoing. The 2018 documentary, Vanished, the Surrey Schoolgirl, brought Ruth Wilson's story to a wider audience than any previous appeal had reached. It produced new testimony from friends who had not previously spoken on the record. It surfaced the detail of Nesta Wilson's death certificate. It prompted a formal response from the Wilson family. It did not find Ruth. Roxy Birch, who has spoken publicly about her friend for over 15 years now, continues to ask the same question she has always asked. If Ruth is alive somewhere, why has she never sent any signal? Why, across 30 years of appeals that explicitly invited her to make contact anonymously just to confirm she was safe, has nothing come back? Roxy says she would like to believe Ruth is out there, but the math of it, as she has framed it, does not add up. No passport, no license, no active bank card, no national insurance record, no medical record, no tax record, no contact of any kind for 3 decades. Ian Wilson, Ruth's father, declined to participate in the documentary. He issued a statement. He confirmed that the family had known Ruth discovered the truth about her mother. He said she chose not to discuss it with them. That is all that is on the record from the Wilson family. Karen Wilson, Ruth's stepmother, the woman who received a bouquet of flowers with no note, delivered 2 days after the girl who ordered them was gone, has not made any public statement. The questions that remain open are not small ones. What happened at Box Hill after the taxi drove away? Was Ruth waiting for someone? Did anyone come? Is there a person alive today who knows what happened on that bridalway on the evening of November 27, 1995, and has never said so? What did Ruth intend when she stood there in the rain? The behavioral evidence, the flowers, the paid dinner, the early morning refusals, the hours alone in the library, the decision to travel to that specific spot in that specific weather, points toward a young woman who had made a decision. But the nature of that decision is not confirmed. Not by any record, not by any witness. Nesta Wilson died on December 10, 1982. Ruth vanished on November 27, 1995, 13 days before the 14th anniversary of her mother's death. Whether that proximity was deliberate, coincidental, or irrelevant, no one can say. There is still no body. There is still no answer. 30 years is a long time for a question to remain unanswered. Liam Macaulay spent years losing sleep over this case because he could not accept that a 16-year-old girl simply ceases to exist without explanation. Martin Bright returned to it because he recognized that the story he had been told of a puzzling but largely untroubling disappearance was not the whole story. Roxy Birch and Catherine Mayer spoke because their friend deserved to be remembered accurately, not sanitized. And all of them, in their different ways, arrived at the same place. Someone knows something. Secrets, as Martin Bright observed, have a tendency to come out in the end. Ruth Wilson was born on January 31, 1979, in Surrey. She loved reading and music and long bike rides through the countryside. She was curious and stubborn and struggling, and she carried things that were far too heavy for a 16-year-old to carry alone. She walked into the Surrey Hills on a November evening, and she stood in the rain, and then she was gone. She deserves an answer. If you've made it to the end of this video, please subscribe and leave a comment below. If you know anything about the disappearance of Ruth Wilson, anything at all, Surrey police continue to maintain an active inquiry. The case has not been closed, it has not been forgotten, and neither has she.